Thank you for joining me on the Get What You Want podcast, where getting what you want isn't always what you think it is. My wish for you is that this show will create an awareness within yourself of what you really want and the possibility of getting it. Let's go create. All right. My guest today is Justine Reichman. Justine is the founder of NextGenChef. Justine says that she considers eating healthy a basic human right, where she says we're empowering the next generation of culinary innovators dedicated to regenerative practices and making nutritious food more affordable. Her San Francisco-based platform supports socially minded entrepreneurs with the resources they need to launch businesses and begin creating greater access to quality food products. I want to welcome you, Justine, and I think today is going to be like such a different podcast. You know, we've talked a lot, and I feel like food is such an important part of every single thing we do in life, right? I mean, it's what sustains.
We connect over it. We meet new people over it. We break bread over it, right?
Honestly, it's like for me, it's so intimate. Food, eating, you know. Date nights, I always want to go eat food, or lunches with the girlfriends, or, you know, business meetings. I feel like we probably should have a meal right now while we're doing this show.
I agree.
Oh, tell me, you have such a diverse, like, interesting background of everything that you have created. And so I want you to start somewhere, start in Mexico, start wherever you want to start, and kind of lead me to where you are right now.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Shirley, for having me today. I'm super excited to be here, and it's great to get to know you as well. I'm always excited to meet the podcast host as well, because you also have had an interesting career, and I'm super inspired by what you've created as well. So
thank you. I appreciate
thank you for having me. So my career, it started long before Mexico City, but I feel like this portion of my career and life began in Mexico City, when, of course, not having a visa led me to investigate new options and really tap into what I was passionate about and what I wanted to do in life. And that was focused around food. And I was literally on the corner of my house, of the block where I lived in Mexico City, getting my hair done. And I was trying to speak Spanish, which I did not do well, because French was my second language, and that was not good at that, regardless. And as I'm trying to say necesita and brushing, the guy says to me, "Do you need some help?" I said, "Yeah, I don't speak Spanish very well." And so one thing led to another, and the guy asked me what I did, and I had told him that I was from New York and that I was there taking pictures, and that I was with my partner and he was working, and he asked me if I would come take some pictures. He worked for the CMR group, which had a foundation called Fundación CMR, which provided resources for lower income families in Mexico City. And I said, that sounds amazing. So I went with them, about 3.5 hours away in Mexico City. Mind you, I had never met these people before. I met them for about 10 minutes, had a lunch with them at the Capitol Grill because they owned the franchise for it, but I didn't really know them. So
that sounds like something I would do.
I had a little leap of faith. They looked nice. They spoke English and taught me a little Spanish and helped me get my hair done. So they picked me up in a little, small sporty car. And I tell you this because it was 3 of us, and the lady comes dressed in her heels and nice clothing, because in Mexico, everyone looks dressed, as opposed to where I live in California, where they don't really get dressed in Marin County. And I'm dressed too, but they neglected to tell me that where we were going, we would then switch to another car, which was a bigger car, and then we'd switch to a third car, which was a pickup truck, and everybody would go from heels to boots. Wow. And then we would go walking up the mountains where the donkeys were to these families that were then in these little houses that they kept so nicely, where they were preparing food for us in their wood burning stoves. with the vegetables that they had grown organically that was supported by the NGO that was funding this whole program that they were taking me to see.
Wow.
So they took me on a tour and they cooked me food, and I was really inspired. And so this NGO worked with them to provide resources for healthy and organic produce and education so that they could grow organic produce for themselves and equally have enough to sell so that they could become self-sustaining. So there's more to that whole story, but I will save that for another time. I'll move fast forward to that inspired me when we came back to California to say, what am I going to do now? And I said, okay, well, maybe I'll have a cooking competition because I was inspired by these families in Mexico to support them that were creating these amazing meals, and have a recipe competition. And I did that, and I said, I got a lot of hobbyists, and I wasn't really into hobbyists. I really wanted to make an impact. So I took this competition and I decided what I really want to do is support food and beverage entrepreneurs and create local ecosystems and create more jobs for people and better for you food. So basically I created NextGenChef, and NextGenChef was a community for food and beverage entrepreneurs to connect with mentors and resources and thought leaders so that they can build better for you food businesses, create better for you food systems, create greater access for all, not just lower income families, but everyone, by building better for you food. And so I built this online platform. I built this community that through lunch and learns, mentorship, the connections online, we connected these food and beverage entrepreneurs with these thought leaders, these mentors and resources so that they could get where they wanted just a little bit quicker, so that they could connect with the resources they need to be able to build better for you food businesses. And so when COVID hit, we then pivoted a little, like everyone did. I'm sure you did as well, right?
For sure.
So we took that in-person community, put it online, made a much more robust offering, took those in-person talks, put them online, still kept the community quite small so that people could feel like they were connecting. Because I'm sure you've been to a lot of talks where people want like hundreds of people there, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But how many conversations do you get out of that?
Yeah, not very many
Right. And the takeaway, you don't feel like you connected one-on-one.
Right.
And I really wanted to replicate that. So we kept it small, but then what we did was we shared those talks online with social so that more people could see it and get the information. And yet we could still have that connection for the small group of our members. So we did that.
So tell me a little bit about like, what does better food mean? Because I know you talk about them growing their own food organically in Mexico. And I went to Africa one time, and we went for a few weeks. And at that time, right before I left, I was gluten-free, trying to eat super healthy, had some allergies to or intolerances to certain foods. And then we got to Africa, and we were put on these small planes. We flew out to have a safari, like a private safari in Botswana. So we were in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't like you could go to a store. We didn't have phones. We didn't have any kind of service. And, we were dropped off on a runway where they had to clear the lions off before we got there, and then taken by these little Jeeps. And there were only a few people in this camp. And we stayed in these tents, and, it was just interesting to me because I was starving because we're out like exploring Africa, and we come back, but it wasn't like I had all these choices of food. So I ate everything. I ate the bread, I ate the dairy, I ate everything. And it was, for one thing, like my mouth had this completely different experience because the food tasted better. And then the other thing is I didn't get a stomach ache. I didn't get, I didn't feel yucky after I ate. So then when I got home, I started telling people that, and then I would hear stories of people who, well, I actually had a niece that lived in Africa, and we had seen her before we came home, and she was telling me how her whole family had these horrific allergies. And then once they got to Africa, they went away. And so when I think about better food, I think that's what I think about is what's going on in our food here in the US that has us not feel the same exact way. I had the same experience in Scotland and Ireland where I could eat bread and I could
too. And Paris.
Yeah. So it's like we can eat food and be totally fine, but it's honestly different food. The bread is different. And so
Well, it's the
speak into that a
soil.
little bit.
Well, so I have the same questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's those questions that inspired me to really put together NextGenChef and now Essential Ingredients, the podcast, because I'm not an expert in these things. And so I wanted to learn. And equally, I want to understand what I'm eating from soil to shelf and what I'm buying off the shelf and what I'm buying at the table and putting on my table for me, my family, my friends. And I want to understand why it is I can sit in a cafe in Paris and eat a croissant and it can be okay when here I can't eat bread and sugars and onion soup and all these different things. And I was dumbfounded and I'm like, I don't understand. So I wanted to bridge the gap, not just for me, but for the businesses and the end consumers, which is one of the inspirations for NextGenChef and Essential Ingredients. So I bring together the thought leaders and the businesses on both sides, from farming, talking about regenerative farming and the differences in what goes in the soil and what they're building and why it's different, so that we can understand and hopefully make a change here, so that maybe we can have that same impact. I'm still on the mission to answer that question.
That's awesome.
Honestly. So I'm being completely
when you for sure know it, let me know.
I can't answer that question completely. We had a guy, Daniel Berchi, on the other day on our podcast talking about regenerative farming. And I continue to bring people on so that we can start to bridge the gap between the different continents to understand the changes in our soil and in our farming, so that we can understand what, the US has certain rules, and some of these rules are for our protection, but I think that some of them are causing us to have different issues and digestive issues, and put different things in our food that create the digestive issues, because they're not creating our digestive issues, we're having them as a result of. Exactly. Right. So but
are you feeling stuck in your relationship? Do you feel you need more? Whether it be more time, attention, security, gifts, intimacy, or companionship, your partner is likely experiencing something similar. Yet both of you are not sure how to fix it. In Shirley Baldwin's best-selling book, Get What You Want From Your Man, she will show you how to get all of this and more. Get What You Want From Your Man is available nationwide through all major bookstores, Amazon.com, and through her website, www.getwhatyouvantguru.com.
But it's those kinds of questions that sparked this interest in me, or one of the interests in me, to build this and to create the platform to have these conversations.
That's awesome. I think a lot.
I'm going to have more interviews so that hopefully I can come back and answer that question for you.
Yeah, or we'll just send people to your podcast for that question. So
I think so.
And your podcast is Essential Ingredients, right? Which I love. I love that you're out there trying to find the answer, because I think that's just so important. So that's why I kind of felt like this was a different podcast today, because we're not really focusing on one thing. One of the things is better foods, right? And that's something that we're all in search of. And especially here in the US, I think that's something that we're all in search of. The other thing is, you're a woman, you started this business from a passion that you had, from something that sparked in you. And that's something I like to talk about too on my show, is whether you're a man or woman, just going with your gut, going with your dream, going with a whim, going with somebody in the middle of Mexico in 3 different cars. By the 3rd car getting into a truck, I'd be like, am I getting kidnapped? Where am I going? I've had similar experiences. So it's like, people are like, why would you even do that? So, and you just went with your gut, and it led you to this, beautiful place with yummy food. And so tell me a little bit about that part of you that I think would be very inspiring for my guests. Like, what what keeps you, it's not like you're a nutritionist and that's your job. It's not like you're, like you have all the answers in this at this, but you just keep launching these businesses and these platforms, and it's all coming from a passion. So tell me a little bit about that.
So, I really think my passion, I've connected my passion and my superpower. I'm good at connecting people. I think that I'm good at connecting with people. And I have a real passion for supporting people and fixing problems. And I love food.
Mm,
I have a real
me
passion for
too.
food. Some people, we eat to live. No. Yeah, we eat to live. I live to eat, right? I know it's a little overplayed, but I seriously do. For me, cooking a meal, I need people to ooh and ah over it because I'm oohing and ahhing over it. I love to eat. And I, and I want people to, I think it's really important to eat well, and I think it makes a difference. And I believe that what I eat changes the way I feel. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it in whether I'm tired, whether I have a headache. I can feel it in everything that I do, my focus. And I think part of it is that I'm pretty in tune with my body. And I think that I'm pretty alert to the immediate change. So ever since I was a little girl, my mother always said, you cannot have dairy. It makes you very congested. Ever since I was a little girl. So she was trying to shove tofuti in my face. As a little girl, who wants their mother to shove tofuti in their face? I mean, that was not, today they have much better alternatives,
Oh, for
like
sure.
Oatly ice cream or Van Leeuwen vegan ice cream if you can't
Yes.
have eggs and all these different things. But back then, they didn't have great alternatives. And now that they do have these great alternatives, I'm inspired to investigate these great alternatives, to see what other great alternatives they are, and to share that with people. And equally, to let people know that by making the right choices, it can have a direct impact both on how you feel, how you perform. And I don't think that everyone out there understands the implications and how dramatic they can be.
Oh, I agree. I completely agree. Every single thing that we do, like my show and my job is all about, like, my show is about getting what you want. What I do in life, like, my superpower is relationships, creating relationships with people. And even in all of that, food plays a part. Like, food is so important. And I have interviewed a couple nutritionists on my show. My daughter's a nutritionist, and I feel like we constantly have conversations about food. And I used to be the person who lived to eat. Like, all of my vacations were planned around food. I would dream about recipes and I'd wake up and make them. I still do that. But I would just, everything was focused around food, and then I got a little older and less able to exercise. And then I have, like, nutritionist daughter. She just graduated with a nutrition degree, and she also does fitness, and she coaches people online on macros and all this stuff that I'm just learning about. But it's interesting because I feel like I'm more and more living to eat. I mean, eating to live. And I kind of want to find a happy medium where I really enjoy everything that I'm eating, but I feel like I've had to cut out so many things that I don't enjoy it as much anymore. And so it is so important to be able to do that. And then to be able to know that sometime in the future we're going to be able to go to restaurants here, or be able to have food experiences where it's maybe even like a law that they have to take certain things out of our foods, or
Oh my God, that
and I
would be a
see that
dream.
that's kind of the direction you're moving in, is an entire movement on creating
It's
better
exactly
food.
what I want to do. I want to create a movement so that my goal with NextGenChef is that people work towards local, healthy, regenerative, accessible, better for you food, so that we have a stamp of approval that if you're NextGenChef approved. So, and you don't have to be all of them, but working towards it, and regenerative, so that and then people then demand it, and then people will have to be, and restaurants will demand it, that, oh, are you NextGenChef approved? Then we all want to go,
I
as you're
love it.
saying. I mean, that's the dream. But I got to tell you, not recently, but ever since the pandemic, I literally really only shop at the farmer's market. I feel like there's less touch points, less people touching it, less
Mhm.
people coughing on it, less people, coughing and then touching. So I go there. But what I've learned is that with the herbs, it's much more fun, and there's less allergens and less things that I'm allergic to that I can cook with. So I can cook with so many things. I'm not cutting as much out, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure.
So I don't feel like I'm missing as much. And I'm being much more creative. I'm thinking out of the box. I mean, I did just buy a new cookbook recently. And if you go through cookbooks, obviously you're like, oh, I can't eat that. I can't eat this, right? But if you're just sort of winging it a little, and you're buying what's local and what's around at that moment because it's fresh and local, odds are you can probably eat most of it. It's local, and you're buying it there. You have less waste, and you just eat it all. So with that, I've been quite inventive. It's been fun. Made a lot of not pesto, curry.
Ooh,
That's
curry.
been a fun one. It's
Yeah.
easy to freeze, although I haven't frozen it yet, but it is easy to freeze, I'm told.
I might need to post some of your recipes on my
Oh, I'll share my
show
favorite.
notes.
I'll
So
share a few favorites.
that would be awesome. So, okay, so we've talked about food, we've talked about business, we've talked about experiences and passion. What is something that you could leave our guests today? One word of advice, and you get to choose whether it's business, food, passion, whatever. But what word of advice would you give to our listeners that they could start today to move towards getting what they want?
I think you shouldn't discount what you really want, what you love doing. I think it's so important to integrate that into what you do, and you shouldn't discount it, no matter what people say.
I love that.
I think it's really
wonderful.
super important. It's as important as anything else that you do.
And then I always ask this question just for the fun of it. Is there anything that you regret or would do over in your life?
Is there anything that I would regret or do over in my life? I look back and I am so grateful that I've had the chance to live in multiple countries and travel. Sometimes I wish I would have figured things out a little bit earlier because I'm having so much fun doing what I'm doing. I mean, I really do. I'm so happy doing what I'm doing. I was like, well, I wish I could have figured out this a long time ago. This would have been so fun. But I'm really happy. I mean, I've got to live in London for a few years back and forth. I got to have a variety of experiences. I got to live in Mexico City. I grew up in New York. I might have had a more formal job for a couple of years, might have been interesting because I think it would have set me up earlier on to be able to have the skills and the foundation to be able to do what I'm doing maybe earlier, because I got to it a little bit later. I mean, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm not old, but I'm not a spring chicken.
I love it. I think I find that there's like two answers, pretty much the most two common answers. And one is, I wish I would have figured this out earlier. And two is, I wouldn't change anything because it's where I got me to, or how I got to where I am now. Right.
So
and
basically, I just said what everybody else says. That's not interesting.
You basically, it's so interesting because I think it's really important. It's like something that I want my listeners to know is that, for one thing, we have all these resources now, right? We have podcasts, we have people listening to us talk. You have a podcast, I have a podcast. And I think that it's important that people understand and have gratitude for the fact that we're giving them all of our mistakes and information that we did so that they can do it earlier. So that won't be it. And also to realize that wherever we are in life is just perfect. And the reason we are who we are is because of what we've gone through. So I think those two messages are so huge. And it is really why I ask them, because I think that it's just a very common thing. And any person that's successful, it's like those two things. I wish I would have done it sooner, or I am who I am because of everything that I went through. So I love it. I think
Okay, so I fit right in that mold, huh?
it's perfect. Well, I don't know that you fit into any mold. I don't know
Well,
that
I
anyone
appreciate that.
necessarily
That I
is
appreciate.
a mold to fit into. That's, that's kind of another huge thing. We'll have to talk about that on a different show sometime, but
Okay, well, I hope to have you on my show too.
I will for sure be on there. And please tell me how we can get in touch with you. Give me your website, your podcast, all that information so we can share.
Okay, wonderful. I will. So my podcast is Essential Ingredients, and you can find that on the JustineReichman.com website. You can download and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, all the regular channels. It's called Essential Ingredients. NextGenChef is nextgenchef.com. And for all of our listeners here today, if we do have any food and beverage entrepreneurs that want to join the community, we are offering a special $10 off our premium membership for our listeners. So don't forget the Let's Connect code, and that is for our yearly membership, which you can find on the nextgenchef.com website.
Awesome.
And you can always reach out to me if you download our app, which is NextGenChef, and it's available for Android and Apple. And you can connect directly with me on our app. It's similar to LinkedIn, but tailored just for food and beverage entrepreneurs. And I'd be happy to chat with you there.
That's awesome. You
so
are
much,
very,
Shirley, for having me.
Of course, you're so relatable, and it's been so fun. And I know that anyone that reaches out to you will love you. So thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Get What You Want podcast. If you loved it, please subscribe, share it with others, and leave me a review on Apple Podcast. You can also visit me on my website at www.getwhatyouwantguru.com. Would love to hear from you. Now go create.